I'll be talking about different types of lies. And first of all, I'll start uh, by stating that, as everything in our experience, lies too has a purpose, the function, and the meaning. So it has its role in the life, in our life. Uh, it and it's uh, functional. So if we want to understand more about lies, we have to understand more about the purpose of lies and, well, the cause as well as the effect. But what perhaps would be more interesting to us is that, uh, well, what reasons do we have for lying? Um, and we need to understand it if we want to make sense of the whole picture that we have in our lives, right? That if uh, anyone is being deceiving towards us, and if we are deceiving towards others. Okay, so to understand what is deception, we would also want to look at it in the picture, right? We want to know its role, but its role in a whole, and to see how it's integrated in, in lives of people. Okay, so um, the categorizations that I will use or tell you about are taken from the book The Truth About Lying by Ginny Graham. So um, Scott separates the lie by its purpose. And before on, before going on explaining each category, uh, I think it's important to understand that it's not only data that is important to us, it is data that makes sense in uh, in the framework that we already have. So it's the kind of data which can be already integrated into existing data that we also experience in our lives. That's why we struggle to um, accept any kind of information. We also are being suspicious, and rightly so. We have all reasons to, but also it's because, well, we already have some sort of data and experiences. And if the new information that we're receiving uh, is so theoretical that we don't recognize it in our experience, right? We don't see it um, actually suiting in what we already know, then, well, we would be clearly adopting it, right? Um, and so I'm saying it just to show that it's not only the information or the fact that matters, or the event, the action. It's the action in a way and an event which makes sense in the whole other sequence of events and actions. It's them being integrated in the uh, picture of the world that you have and being coherent that also matters to you. And we not only search for coherency, it's that our whole understanding and functioning depends on the coherency of the world. And that's how we operate, and that's how um, our brain operates, right? Because our brain receives a different source of data, and different regions are responsible for different functions. And um, So the data also, the different kind of data, let's say sensory data, um, passes on to different regions, right? So the different brain regions, they share the data and the information, and so they kind of function together to make the sense of it, to build a coherent picture, right? Um, so they work together into sharing the data that they have with each other, so as to make the sense, to build an image or a picture of the whole. The assumption is here that there is a whole that is functioning, and that all these small parts, they play the role in the whole, so that there is a chain of the um, causal relationships, that everything interconnected and everything has its purpose in a whole, and whole itself has some also purpose and meaning, right? So that's how we are functioning, and this is also the whole the assumption um, under which we function, that everything has a role to play in something bigger than itself, and that each small data that we find or have has its, or should have its place in the other data that we have. And these data too, and all of that data that we have, it should be working together and to be kind of integrated into uh, united picture, uh, which is also coherent. Therefore, everything in each small thing is interconnected. Well, otherwise, how would we function, right? Because, well, that would be increasingly hard to know which small thing is just random and not needed, and assume that it doesn't link to anything, and the other things are all kind of purposeful. That wouldn't make sense, right? So we have the assumption that each small thing matters. Okay, so with that assumption, now we can come into the daily life information and events, motives, and um, reasons behind our actions. And so we come to the topic of lies today. And now let's talk about the categories of lies. So the author of the book states that, well, first of all, let's recognize that lie has a purpose, it has a function. We lie for something, we lie to do something. We don't just lie randomly. It serves a purpose, it serves the system as a whole. Okay, so what purpose does it serve? And now let's start explaining the categories. So first lies that she mentions, like, are the protective lies, which are quite obvious, right? So you tell lies to protect yourself or someone else, let's say from harm, from punishment, from embarrassment, from disapproval, to preserve the life and well-being. So in this sense, the lie serves as the serves defensive function, right? It helps you with something. It's not meaningless. It's not random. It's not stupid. It's not strange. It has its function, and it could be quite useful to you. That's why you use it in the first place. It's important to recognize. Okay, so now when you start seeing its purpose and function, it starts to make sense, and it starts to be easier to understand when someone's lying. And why would someone lie? Well, let's say to protect himself. Okay, what other reasons there could be? So the other reason that author highlights is the accusative lies. This is basically the lies you tell to gain something, to receive, to have more. Uh, let's say money, power, status, affection, um, we can say that these lies are offensive rather than defensive. They reach for something more, not to preserve the current uh, state. So great. So you minimize the offense, you maximize your well-being. That's the function of the lie. Protect yourself, reach for more. What else could it be? So the author qualifies another type of lie as the social lie. So basically, uh, an obvious fact is that we all have a social life and we're social beings, and we, well, hardly can escape all other agents that we play a game of life with. And so we live in a society and we lie to maintain the social harmony, the peace in society that we live in. Um, Maybe, and it's not necessarily that you do it to preserve the life or your well-being. But as to me, I could say that, well, you also can link social lies to pretty much the previous categories of protective or acquisitive lies. Um, because, well, even in a social context, you would lie to preserve something or to have more of something for yourself or for someone else, right? Let's say you lie um, to spare, again, someone's feeling. You don't want to offend the person. Um, what are you actually doing? Well, what is the offense? Uh, it's a threat, let's say to your status, but all of that is kind of a threat because of your mortality. So it's like you can link it to life preservation, protective life. But anyway, so she categorizes lies into social lies because it makes clear its function. So, as to me, all lies would be social lies because, well, even if you lie to someone else, right? Uh, if it's deception or self-deception, could be, let's say, individual, not social. But anyway, okay, let's move on. So another type that she mentions is self-enhancement lies, which I would link it to the uh, acquisitive lie, to gain something. Like you try to appear more impressive. This is what self-enhancement lie is. Try to appear more impressive. But if we ask ourselves why would we do it, we would do it to reach for something greater and to preserve what we already have. So it's basically, I would say, um, subcategory of the two categories mentioned above, the protective and acquisitive lies. Okay, so self-enhancement, let's say. And then malicious lies, another type of lie, and it was the lie you tell when you intend to hurt or damage someone. Uh, for various reasons. It could be envy, anger, revenge, spite, all kinds of reasons. Maybe you believe that it's good to do evil, or you believe yourself to be the hand of judgment. I don't know. But a malicious lie, that you intend to hurt someone or damage someone. Um, and another type would be the pathological lie, which is basically uh, the lie for the sake of lying. now you're a compulsive liar, right? The lie itself has become your goal. Um, Sometimes the motive or the benefit of it can be unclear. Right. And so, talking about all these types, we recognize clearer that, well, lies have a place to be for the reason. And if you can't address the reason, you can properly address the problem of deception. And you do want to address the problem of deception because you want to address the problem of trust and relationships and manipulation and all the other kinds of problems that are tightly linked to deception, right? And well, if you want to trust the person, you want to ensure that he or she is not lying to you. But how do you know it if you know little about lies? Mm, how do you know what exactly for are you manipulated? What's the purpose it serves to manipulate her? Mm. So to understand the function of a lie, the purpose of a lie, is to make a better sense of it and is to be able to deal with it properly and to kind of be be aware of it and adapt. Um, Another thing that also could be helpful to consider is that a person doesn't just tell random lies, right? Because we already mentioned that, well, nothing is truly random, as in our experience. So, such people, they often develop a lying profile. So, which would mean it's kind of a preferred style of deception, right? Or the habit, the goal, the environment that they live in. So you can understand that it could easily be a habit. The influence of the environment. It could be learned, just as any habit. So, but it doesn't make it random. Just if it's learned, it doesn't mean it's random. It still serves the purpose. And well, if you want to understand why does it has a place to be, you want to understand the purpose of it first. So let's say a person who uses self-enhancement lies at the workspace, let's say, um, you could recognize that, well, her goal would be, of course, to receive a greater benefit. Right. Well, this is kind of clear. What's that? What can you do with it? Or let's say, again, protective lies. It's also kind of clear. Well, someone lies to preserve themselves. Well, you can do lots of things with that because when you recognize that the person is not necessarily malicious, um, it doesn't mean that like there is no place for you to trust the person. It just means that perhaps you can communicate clearer how you're not the threat to the person, or uh, so you perhaps you can communicate it out. Let's say because well, the solution could be just remove the feeling of being threatened from the person, and then there wouldn't be a need for protective lies because they wouldn't feel that their lives are in danger. Um, right? And so let's go back to the example with self-enhancement. Okay, so you can say, well, this person clearly wants a better benefit, so she pretends that she's more, let's say, competent or confident than she actually is. Let's say competent. Let's say narcissists, for example, they even uh, not always performatively, sometimes uh, arrogantly overestimate themselves, uh, and so um, maybe not consciously but unconsciously, but they do use self-enhancement lies, right? And so it's also clear to people why would they use it. Well, obviously, to appear more than they are. So to make a better deal for themselves. Okay, so can you use this information? Well, then perhaps you can communicate out to the person that, or make sure that the person realizes that, well, this won't work out. He or she can receive the benefit without proving the competency. Okay, so, well, because if they use these lies to appear more than they are to gain the benefit is the goal. So you can deal with the goal, you can look at the goal, and then you can make it clear that the goal will not be achieved um, through lie. And so this could be your um, strategy, is to make clear that lie is not the right strategy for the deceiver to operate by, and that it will not be effective. And you have to make it obvious. And that how you could use this information. That's how you could deal with it. So this is important because it helps you to make a better sense of it, instead of looking at lies as isolated events, because it suggests that deception is a behavioral pattern that can be mapped and even predicted. It can be predicted, it can be recognized and dealt with. This is important. And the strategy for you to deal with that would be through this realization of the role of lies and the goal of a liar, the motive of the liar. Uh, was the example of malicious lies, let's say, because the author uses a lot the example of um, malicious lies. So the evil oftentimes that the person wants to inflict could be justified in his head. Let's say again, he thinks he performs the sword of goodness. Actually, he thinks he does it for some good. Obviously, as famously stated, good is claimed to be something each one strives for, right? So he thinks, well, it's better in some way. Maybe it brings him pleasure. So it's justifiable because without doing it, he feels nothing, or she, the person feels nothing. So to feel alive, the person will do that, let's say. Or people are all evil and cruel, so it's better this way. Because we need this coherency, we need to have a coherent picture of the world. We need to have an answer to our actions, right? We also need to see their role, and um, for these reasons, there would be many justifications that deceiver, malicious deceiver would use, because he or she, well, needs to see the role of his her lies, and so there would be many justifications uh, at hand to create the kind of narrative where this lies would be necessary, harmless, or even virtuous, right? Because they have to somehow resolve this cognitive dissonance of their actions. You can't do something random and purposeless. You function for something. And so you also need to recognize what is it that you function for, to achieve to that, to strive to that productively. And the negative result is the kind of non-result, right? So you need to see it as at least in some way positive result for yourself. Otherwise, why would you do that? And so, obviously, the malicious deceiver also deceives for reason and purpose that serves him a sort of benefit. And when you recognize the benefit, you can ensure that the benefit would not be well. Perhaps you could stand on the way of deception by making sure that uh, there would be no gaining of the benefit through the strategy of through the deceiving strategy, right? Um, and for the self deception, it would just similarly uh, serve some purpose, self enhancement, protection, protective. Um, there would also be many justification playing a role. Um, and similarly, the internal narrative being repeated and told to sustain the action, to remind oneself of its uh, benefit and goodness, right? Um, because the lie should fit the narrative, it should fit in the picture of the world. Otherwise, how can you function? And so it's also a good question to ask yourself: in which way does it complete the picture that the person's looks at the world? In which way does this lie complete his perception or his motivations? Right? His paradigm, the framework that he uses to operate in the world. How does this lie adds to his picture of the world? And of course, those are the hard questions. But when you see the patterns in the behavior, that they stop to be um, so complex. You start to notice the patterns, and you understand their role, and therefore you see clearer the picture that, or the framework the person operates by, which is very helpful. Okay, so well, this will be it um, for this video.